over the course of 2025, I think we hit 200. I don't know where we end 2025 at. I think we usually see these cycles tail off in October, November, but I do think we see a higher high than most people are expecting.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other so we can build a future beyond what we know. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
Hello and welcome to Markets Daily, hosted by me, Jen Sanasi. On this show, we navigate the currents shaping the crypto markets, providing insights against the broader financial landscape. So whether you're actively investing or simply fascinated by the volatility that is the crypto markets, this show is your compass to understanding what's happened, where we are, and where we're going. On today's show, we're welcoming Core DAO initial contributor Rich Rines. Rich, hello.
Hello, great to talk to you again, Jen.
Of course, great to have you back. I mean, what a morning to have you back. More than $300 billion has been wiped out of the crypto market since January 6th. Talk to me about what you're making of this information. I know there was a short period in December when we all thought that we'd be flying high here in January. Talk to me about what you're watching this morning.
So I too shared that view back in December, coming off the election, that we were going to get a Santa Claus rally, and I think there was a bunch of tests and rejections, and unfortunately, we didn't get there. And I think the way to think about it in hindsight is we pulled forward a lot of expectations in November, in December, and now we've come a little bit back, more to reality as we've got a lot of uncertainty around the inauguration. The Fed recently was hawkish. There's a lot of not strictly up only as it appeared just a couple months ago. But I think that's a very interesting time to get involved in some of these digital assets like Bitcoin, where I think over the next year or so, there's a lot of structural drivers to make Bitcoin and Bitcoin adjacent assets really appealing.
Talk to me a little bit about some of those structural drivers. What do you think is going to continue to make Bitcoin appealing to larger and larger audiences?
So I think the strategic Bitcoin reserve has been hot on the news topics over a little bit, and there's been some speculation that maybe that does happen in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. I think I'm not going to factor that one into my own math, but I do think there is a potentially fairly decent likelihood that it does happen. But in my mind, it's probably a coin flip, maybe 59 or 51-49 type thing. On top of that, I think we'll continue to see more and more ETF inflows. That was the other really interesting part of the end of last year. We started to see outflows for the first time in size, and it was showing you that, hey, that the market is cooling off a little bit. But I think over the next year, we're going to see that Bitcoin is going to continue to evolve as a part of the financial system. It's not going away, and we'll see even larger inflows than we did this year.
I saw some headlines recently that said we could pull back as far as 75K. Talk to me. I ask everyone on this show, not everyone answers, so it's okay if you don't want to give a prediction, but talk to me about how you see the price of Bitcoin fluctuating over the next year. Where do you see the price of Bitcoin headed?
So I think personally, 75 is a fantastic buying opportunity. I mean, I've been in Bitcoin since 2013, and when you see these big bull market pullbacks, that they're usually great times to get involved. Not financial advice. Over the course of 2025, I think we've hit 200. I don't know where we end 2025 at. I think we usually see these cycles tail off in October, November, but I do think we see a higher high than most people are expecting. I don't think people, like, we do get a strategic Bitcoin reserve, something similar. I don't think people have accurately priced in what sort of demand that will be. And that's another net new structural demand driver versus just the ETFs.
Talking about some of these catalysts, the approval of the ETFs, a more crypto-friendly administration coming into the United States, a lot of new folks are looking at Bitcoin or looking at cryptocurrency assets. And you've been in the space for a really long time. For people who are just starting to get involved or just starting to learn about what Bitcoin is, what it means to hold Bitcoin, what advice would you give them?
So I think there's been an amazing amount of new materials that have come out. My former answer used to be, start the Bitcoin white paper, and I think that's still a great spot for people to go. But if you look at some of the materials put out by BlackRock, Fidelity, et cetera, now that are more at a kind of classic investor audience, those materials are phenomenal. And I think they still get across the key pieces that the Bitcoin white paper used to get across, which was this non-sovereign store of value, perfect scarcity. And especially as we're in such uncertain economic times, the appeal of Bitcoin is that much more interesting for so many people, not just in the US, but globally. And now with the ETFs, there's access for folks that cannot self-custody or don't want to use an exchange, and they can access it through whatever retirement account, et cetera, that they have. And I think now that it's so accessible and so legitimized, there's just, there's so many people that haven't got involved yet. And now is, as good a time as ever.
There was another headline this morning. There's some unconfirmed reports that TV News is suggesting that the US government has been given the green light to liquidate as much as $6.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. This is an interesting time, right? We have the Biden government leaving. We have the Trump administration coming in. Trump has said he wouldn't sell any of the US's Bitcoin. The Biden administration might. Talk to me about how you make sense of that and what people should take away from these government reserves and speculating on whether they're sold or not.
So I think we can look at our friends over in Germany and watch what happened, late last year as they liquidated, their large Bitcoin holdings. And that's a pretty expensive mistake at this point. And I hope that the U.S. doesn't, follow in a similar vein, which is the Biden administration was so notably anti-crypto. Amazing work by Nick Carter, Coinbase, et cetera, that have done all that investigation into the Operation Choke Point 2.0. But this would kind of be the crescendo, right? Like this would kind of be the final, ending salvo to the crypto regime in the U.S. And that's really unfortunate if that is where we head. I think the market's already largely priced it in, and I think people also underappreciate the flows that we're seeing. And I think you've seen the Sailor bid, you've seen these other folks that maybe other nation states are accumulating. But I think 6.5 billion, again, short-term bearish, but long-term great buying opportunity.
Let's steer away from Bitcoin for just a second and talk about some of the alts and maybe even meme coins out there. The audience gets mad at me because I often say alts and meme coins, and they think that I'm saying that they are one and the same, which I am not. But what are you looking at outside of Bitcoin as we head deeper into 2025?
So I think meme coins have been really interesting, and I think they will do well in 2025. We've seen it's light speed gambling effectively, and that's appealing to so many different folks out there. Your dopamine senses go wild, and it's hard to pick what's the meme of the day if you're not super in the trenches on crypto Twitter, etc. Not having to be where I spend a lot of my time, but people have done phenomenally well in those trades. What I've been spending more time on is kind of these Bitcoin beta assets, and of course that's some of the role at core. But I think what we haven't really priced in as an industry is you've had so much Bitcoin adoption. Now people are aware of Bitcoin. Well, now people are going to want to go put their Bitcoin to work. And especially if we get strategic Bitcoin reserve, et cetera, that's going to accelerate, I think, a lot of these, levered Bitcoin beta plays. I think the Ethereum ecosystem is also largely undervalued. I think there's been a lot of Ethereum hate over, the last, few months, but there are some really amazing technicals behind it. And I do think that over the year, we do see Ethereum do pretty well. And then if you haven't had a Solana position over the last 12 to 18 months or whatever, it's been a tough time to put up good numbers.
It's interesting you say that. I've had some people come on the show and say, Ethereum could be the BlackBerry of this industry, could get flipped soon by some of its competitors. Talk to me a little bit more about why you remain bullish on Ethereum.
So I think it's the second largest crypto asset. There's such an amazing developer community, and one of the reasons that it's doing poorly at the moment relative to some of these other assets is because it's just a lacking of technical leadership and a roadmap that's really clear in order to how they go compete with these generation 2 or generation 3 chains like a Solana or a Sui. And with that, they're kind of getting left behind, and they've been kind of like the most hated coin this rally. I think in bull markets, hopefully all things go up, and I think there will be some sort of 2025 announcement where Ethereum does get back on track. And I think that makes it a really interesting risk reward relative to some of these other things that have been trading really, really well or been maybe too hot over the last 12 months.
Just before we started talking about Ethereum, you mentioned some of the Bitcoin beta plays and how to put your Bitcoin to work. Talk me through maybe your top 2 or 3 ways to put your Bitcoin to work.
So, and I think this will be a story either maybe in 2025 after the Ethereum ETFs get staking, or potentially 2026. We'll see how quickly some of the crypto policy stuff moves in the US. But I think as soon as the Ethereum ETFs have staking, you will see Bitcoin staking ETFs as well. It's going to make sense where you have this very large, passive capital asset base that can now go earn passive yield. And that's kind of the next step of Wall Streetification, if you will. You go from spot assets, then you start to go to derivatives, and now you have the ability to go earn passive yield through staking. So you're not lending those assets. We all saw what happened with MicroStrategy when they announced, not MicroStrategy, sorry, Marathon, when they announced recently they were lending their Bitcoin. So I think a lot of those things will be untenable. So that passive yield opportunity in a non-custodial staking product like Core, where there's no principal risk, I think will be very appealing. And I think it will also allow these ETF issuers to compete on fees in a different way. and you'll see some zero fee products, even though these have been wildly profitable for the BlackRocks of the world. So I think that's one aspect. And Bitcoin staking is probably $100 billion plus opportunity today. I think the other very appealing spot of kind of these how do you put your Bitcoin to work plays is going to be some of these let's call them like Bitcoin backed stable coins, where you can actually earn passive yield on your Bitcoin or leverage, right? But it's leveraged to in a very safe way, but it's kind of the entry point to okay, how do you start to get stable coins against your Bitcoin, maybe avoid some taxes and go use some of these Bitcoin that you've been holding for a long time, and now kind of use it as your daily driver. And I think that's going to be a big story, particularly in the emerging markets for the next several years, where Bitcoin is this perfect collateral asset. And you'll see these neobanks that look very similar to a Revolut or a Robinhood, et cetera. They're super friendly, but under the hood, you're borrowing against your Bitcoin. You're using stables to make payments.
Rich, just before we wrap up, I ask some people on the show, and you are one of our lucky guests. Give me if you were to think ahead, and think about your perspective of the markets. What's your hottest take? What do you think is going to happen, let's say, over the next quarter that you think enough people are not talking about?
Wow, that's a tricky one for me to think of. I think people underestimate how large this cycle will be, and I think we are in a super cycle where we have actually changed kind of the market structure of how these crypto 4-year cycles have gone on. And I think people underestimate what this transition period is going to look like. And kind of the analogy that I've given a few folks was, I remember 1999. I was young at that time, but I remember my 75-year-old neighbor that was day trading stocks. And we haven't seen anything like that in terms of the crypto space, maybe since 2017. The 2021 cycle, as interesting as it was much more muted in terms of kind of that Main Street adoption, less Shiba Inu and some of those other meme coins. And I think whether it's this cycle, potentially next cycle, we will see something that rivals the .com and translated forward to today. And I think that will be a much bigger kind of phenomena to go watch. And I think some of these crypto assets will perform generationally.
It's interesting that you say 2021 was muted, because from within the industry, it feels like it was, and it feels like that hype, that excitement was there. But you're absolutely right. Looking in from outside, it really was muted. There wasn't really that staying power with the mainstream audience. So that's a very good point there.
Yeah, 2021 was a lot of fun, and don't get me wrong, but it was very muted, and it was also during a period of meme stocks, everything else. It was like just kind of a function of all of these assets, inflating pretty rapidly. And I think if that was just directed at crypto, wow, it would have been quite a different cycle. But I think now we're pretty firmly in the focal point. This and AI really.
Rich, thanks so much for joining the show. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks for having me. Chat soon.
And thank you to our audience who watch and listen to Markets Daily every day. If you prefer to listen to this show, please subscribe to the CoinDesk Podcast Network that is available on all podcast platforms. If you like watching us, we are on YouTube. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.